Yes, yes, and thank you for the value that you add to the community with your comments. I think it's so important for people to feel validated in what they offer to the group and the community, and there's so much that we can learn from each other. So we are going to go live in about 27 seconds here. So when we get down to 5, I'll count us down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we'll be live. Welcome everybody. Today we are going to be chatting about group classes, group sessions, and just having, an honest conversation about how we do things. I think one of the most important things is that as tutors, there's no one right way to run your business. And sometimes getting different people's opinions really helps when it comes to figuring out what's going to work best. What should I do? And you have to go with what we call your gut feeling. Like after you take a look at that advice, what does your gut tell you that you need to do? Some people are going to make sense when they give their responses, and some people you look at it and you think, did they understand the question correctly? But today I've got Michael Malioni here with me, who is a part of our community, and we're just going to have a candid discussion just about pricing and different thoughts and processes about that. So, Michael, tell everybody a little bit more about who you are and what you tutor.
Okay, hello everybody. Hi, I'm Michael Malioni. I'm in California, Bay Area, and I tutor STEM. Traditionally, I've been high school math and science, but what's happened to me in the last couple of years, ever since COVID, is I've been kind of focusing more on upper elementary and the transition to middle school and middle school math.
All
That was
right.
just sort of a demand that emerged really after that spring of 2020, when there were no classes for a while. It was all just
Right.
teachers figuring it out online as they went.
Yeah.
And so now I do, and that was also when I started doing groups more. It was
Hmm.
usually just one-on-one, and then because I started working with younger, groups kind of emerged. I use Beast Academy as the main platform. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that
Yeah,
program.
I've used it. It's really great for challenging kids.
Yeah, yeah, and it's mostly enrichment tutoring I do.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
and so
think that's
yeah,
so
that's
important. That's so important for people to know that tutoring isn't always about helping kids that are struggling. Tutoring is also for those kids that they're not being enriched enough, right? And there's other opportunities that are out there for them. And I used Beast Academy with one of my math students that I was working with, and we absolutely loved that program. It was so much fun, and there were times where it was really, really hard content to kind of go through for the age child that they have at that level, but it was really fun how they incorporated like the books and the reading and all of that kind of stuff. So very cool. I'm glad that you're into groups and working with groups of kids and being able to do what you're able to do. Now, do you do tutoring full time?
right now. I mean, I was a stay-at-home dad before I really got into this, and what happened was right when my youngest was 4, the school district had need for a teacher, so I actually worked as a long-term substitute teacher at the public high school, the 9th grade algebra class, actually integrated math. And that was the year COVID hit. And
Okay.
I'd been doing tutoring just kind of on the side as something to do. But then after that year teaching in the schools, I just realized I like tutoring so much better, because I get to choose the curriculum. I get to focus my attention on each particular child. I'm not there. I liken it to driving a big bus as opposed to a sports car. When I'm teaching in the classroom, it's like I'm driving a school bus,
Yes.
and very limited maneuverability. But
Hmm.
when I tutor, and I used to tutor more in person, I switched to online with COVID. Everybody was online, and I've kind of kept it that way since. I find I'm able to really get close online by asking and hearing, and the feedback of being able to see the same paper or page, with screen, you usually do a whiteboard type of thing. Better even than when I'm sitting there over, standing over their shoulder while they write. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. How exciting. I have so many people too that ask that question, like, well, and just out of curiosity, do you have any teaching degrees?
Uh, well, I have STEM degrees.
You
So
have
I
STEM
have a
degrees.
bachelor's degree in chemistry and physics from Harvard, master's degree in
Just
electrical
from Harvard.
engineering.
Yeah.
So I have the STEM education. The
Yeah.
teaching kind of came to me more. I do have some years of experience as an adjunct teaching actually a college class, but it's sort of an interesting mix because I was teaching physics and math to art students.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it was more about reaching them and getting them interested in the material than it was about doing, even the level I had when I had it as an undergrad. It was
Sure.
really more covering the basics with students and getting them engaged in it.
I
And I
love
did
it.
that for about 5 years. And to answer your question now, I tutor about 20 hours a week. So I don't know if we'd call that part-time,
Actually,
but
I
it's
would
the
say
only
I would say
thing.
that's full time, like in the
Yeah,
tutoring world, because like
yeah.
20 hours can actually replace an income. Like if you were in the teaching world, 20 hours of working with students, and if you're doing groups, you're even making more than like one to one that you could make. So no, I would
That's true.
say
Although with my younger groups, I tend to because there's this question of do third graders really need tutoring? My rate generally is consistent with like for younger kids, I don't charge more as they come into the group. I just divide the rate until
okay.
I get three, and then I start going up from there. So
Oh, okay,
four or
gotcha.
more I go up, but three or less I kind of just keep it, just take my rate as it would be for one and divide it.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
but older kids, like high school, no. Then I would add like maybe 50%. First kid
sure.
would be full price and then 50% for the next one and maybe for
Huh.
each additional one.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to be
Uh,
diving deeper on into that conversation as we go through this, because there are so many different ways and things that you can do as you are coming up with the pricing for this. I want to introduce you guys as well to Erica Victory. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Erica. Who do you tutor? Where are you from? All that great stuff.
I am in Southwest Ohio in Cincinnati, and I appreciated hearing your dialogue with Michael because in my area, tutoring is specific. That term is specifically used for remedial. Um, when we're talking about, or it may not even be in my entire city, maybe it's just the region that I live in. Um, when we talk about like sessions, like Michael was describing, we don't call that tutoring. So I don't know if it's a geographic thing. That would be more like classes, is what we call them. So, like Michael was saying, they're session based. And then, you can have kids come and go. But when we talk about tutoring, we think of remedial, or there are some people who use it with gifted, but it's more reserved for like one-on-one, if that makes sense. Um, so I taught for 4 years, then was a stay-at-home mom for 13, and that's how I got into the one-on-one stuff. I before I had kids, I always stayed after school and tutored that way, and then just wanted to stay at home with my kids and make a little extra income. So that's kind of how I got started. And I really appreciate that time because I lucked out and got into a pretty affluent area and I would travel to their homes. But because of that, I learned a lot of things and learned to take prepayments monthly. And I would show up. And I mean, I remember one month there was a family, they had paid me almost $500. And out of all the days I had showed up, there was one time that I tutored their child, and it was all preventable things. They just didn't look at their schedule ahead of time, soccer
Mm.
practice, parent teacher conferences. So that's kind of how that evolved for me. And it's worked out ever since. Then I did online teaching from about 2012 to just this past February. And I was a reading specialist. And like Michael said, like I can totally relate to that analogy with being a big school bus driver, because I went in like, and I didn't have full classrooms, but I would have anywhere between, well, it's anywhere from one-on-one to maybe as big of a group as 8, but they were constantly pulling us to sub. And so here I am, this intensive reading specialist, trying to like make the biggest impact as quickly as possible with those
Yeah.
struggling readers and those with dyscalculia as well. And I was constantly being pulled. And then COVID hit, and then it was really bad. So I just last year said I have had enough, and I took an online teaching position again to kind of like get back at home and start back up again. And happy to say in February I resigned from that, and it's been crazy that I've just been so busy. It's crazy. I don't even have enough room for kids. So
I know. Isn't that awesome? That is the best position to be in when it comes to your business.
yes.
Yes, yeah. And that's interesting. The whole idea too about like the different words that people use and what are the definitions that have people have. That could be like a whole other segment, right? Like on what do
Right.
people mean when they say this or they say that. But yeah, that's
Right.
I think
Sometimes
that's
I
so
call it
cool.
math club with my,
There you go.
Yes.
Perfect.
yeah.
Yes.
I've done that with
Yeah.
reading. I've done for math, I've called it math lab. And then for reading, I've called it book club. But I advertise, well, I shouldn't say advertise, but I run that as session based. And so that maybe is just a geographical difference.
I don't know if it's geographical. I think there's just lots of terms that have lots of different meanings to different
Oh,
people. So yeah, I don't think it's geographical. I think there's a lot of like misunderstandings about like what tutoring really can be. You can do group tutoring with kids that I mean just like we do in school, like we have pull out reading classes, right? You can do pull out reading tutoring or math tutoring with a group of kids that have similar struggles, or you could do enrichment like Michael is doing and have it's not necessarily tutoring, but because our students' parents aren't necessarily going into Google and looking for math club, online math club, you can't really use that word when it comes to advertising your tutoring services, right? You need to put on in there that it's the tutoring and what it is that it looks like for you and that your website then kind of clarifies that. I think that
let me ask you
definitely
this
helps.
question, and maybe Michael or Stan could help me for some advice or whatnot. So, my experience is that um, parents who want that or ask about that, like when I've done it in years past, like they're never on target with where their kids are. So, or where the neighbor's friend is from, or, can I bring this swim team club member because they're picking up from swim club? I mean, we've all been there. We know all the different things that come up, but like, I don't know that that works for me. And maybe I'm doing something wrong. So I'd love advice for that. Like, I, the times that I've done it, I've felt exploited, number one, misled, number two, because the parents told me, or whoever it was, told me they're similar in abilities. And that has proved not to be the case in my
Mm,
experience.
mhm.
And then the third level is that it just, there's so many intricacies. Like, what do you do if back off $5, $10, prorate it, whatever, and then one shows up and one doesn't? And there's just so
Mhm.
many webs to it. It completely overwhelms me.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And we'll dive into that a little bit more, but I just want to introduce Stan to everybody. Stan Mezzo. So Stan, I'm gonna have you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you're from,
Sure.
and what you tutor.
Sure. Um, I am currently in Las Vegas, and right, I guess I joke it's the home of dyscalculia because lots of people come here, not always fully aware of how math impacts their lives. Right. I grew up in Chicago. Um, I used to work as a management consultant, so I have a bit of a business background, but I've always been tutoring, probably I think the first time was actually in third grade, where a teacher sort of said, right, as a good classroom management technique, hey, help out these kids, right? Probably as a behavioral management tool for me. So I got into tutoring when I moved west for some family reasons, and there wasn't really the kind of business that I was in Chicago. And I started helping one child, and their mom really liked what I was doing. And then they told other moms, and before I knew it, right, I would rather have a 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. schedule than a 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. schedule. I think there's a professor in Las Vegas at UNLV who says his goal was always to become a millionaire without waking up before noon, right? So that's right. He teaches business here, but that was sort of the idea. And my entry was through actually very gifted kids. Right? These were kids who were, and I think it might overlap with what Michael was talking about, because I'm very familiar with art of problem solving, right, and Beast and stuff like that. So my kids were usually taking AP Calculus in 8th grade. Right, so they were very it was an intersection of motivated parents, motivated kids, and the financial resources to enable this, right? So I was a little bit spoiled by that. Not in a bad way, but I just developed very high expectations, right, of parental engagement, of motivation, right, of the issues were somewhat different. Like I think what Erica said, a lot of these kids who want to go from a 91 average in a math class to a 98, the idea of a tutor is it touches at their self-esteem, right? Tutoring, for some backgrounds at least, it was, right, tutoring is for kids who aren't superstars. I'm a superstar, right? So to touch on that a bit, like sometimes the idea of phrasing it as coaching, right? Because
I've done that too.
Yeah, the world's greatest tennis players have coaches.
Yeah.
Right. The world's greatest gymnasts, they have coaches. So I found not necessarily use it, right, and it depends on the background, right? I had students from the British speaking South world, meaning like South Africa or England. Their tutoring is a little bit it's not it doesn't have the idea of remedial the remedial approach, right? In a lot of my students were from South Asia or East Asia. It was normal, right? Like in Korea, there are superstar tutors, right? Where it's a little bit, people want that, right? So I wanted to address what Erica brought up, and I don't know if Michael mentioned it. So I think it's important. It's definitely an important way of how to communicate what you're doing, right? Especially, it might be in the world of enrichment versus remedial work, right? And part of identifying my target was, I definitely do remedial work with kids, right? And I also do SAT, ACT prep. But when I have a 12th grader who really struggles, I'm not usually the best person. I usually tell them, let's find someone I'm not equipped to help you in the way that someone who's been doing this for 10 years can, right? So I think that's, now, Erica brought up a lot of good points about groups. And right, so if you mentioned how parents you don't always get that correct information, but I usually don't expect parents to even have that, right? I think a lot of parents can't assess their kids correctly because they don't have
Oh,
the
not in
background you
reading.
have,
Not in reading. Not in reading.
right? For
They really can't.
yeah,
They are so off base when it comes to where they think that their child is in reading. I totally disagree with that, but I appreciate your comment. Maybe in other areas, but when it comes to reading, they always think they're reading higher than they are.
yeah. Well, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying they can't.
Yeah. Yeah. They really
Yeah,
struggle with that.
right. Parents can't. They don't have the background, right? They don't have, unless they're somehow involved in their education. A lot of them have multiple kids, right? A lot of families I work with, and it's not. I don't think it's even fair to expect someone who works a full-time job to know exactly where each of their kids is standing in term, right? That's why
Yeah.
you're there, right? So I think that's one of the issues that you correctly brought up is you can't rely on them as a source, right? So usually what I would do, the very few times groups worked for me is I can very quickly figure out sort of where you are. It's like when someone goes for a piano audition and plays 12 notes and the music teacher's like, I know, I've heard enough, right?
Mhm.
When you do this enough, like all of us know, like I can ask you 3 questions and I know by how you answer them what you know and what you don't know. So it's definitely an issue for making a group, right? So the times it's worked is when I've had students, and this was very like when I lived in Scottsdale, there was this gifted school network called Basis, right? And I think there's one in San Jose actually, which might be Michael's.
I've
Sort of
seen
neck
the
of the
school.
woods.
I know of it. Yes.
Yeah, right. So I knew what the curriculum was, and if the teachers might be a little bit different, but everyone was so well aligned, and I sort of had a good idea on how to make a group, right? And I would meet the kids beforehand. So that took some time. This was again in the days of in-person learning, right? So um, I sort of would, I remember I would group kids by sort of like which golf club they lived in, right? Like today I'm doing Country Club Estates. This day I'm doing Scottsdale Acres, right? So that was part of it as well, like who's geographically close. Um, and I've never really done. I'm going to be doing something this summer, just to experiment, right? It will be, but I think the way I envision it is for a group, either it's a large group, like I've seen large group, this is more at the college level. Again, I think there's a few online OChem teachers who just have this is a webinar, you pay $5, whatever it is, you run your session and then you're done, right? So however many people you have, you don't care because it's one way, right? The webinar is run, and that's it. I think in person it would be mostly for enrichment, people who are highly engaged, and you pay, and that like there's no takebacks, right? You've paid, even if you show up never, I'm sorry I can't help you, right? Because the cost of running an in-person class, right? The risk should be borne by whoever's signing up, not by you.
Right. If
So
they don't show up,
that's
that's not your responsibility. That's their responsibility. I kind of feel like that too. And that was one of the things that somebody had said, like, well, what if you have like two students inside of a class and then one of them doesn't show up? You should make it that the one person pays the whole amount. And I thought, well, no, I don't think I agree that one person should pay the full amount for that 1 hour session. It should be like an agreed upon thing ahead of time that if the class is at this time on this day, and if you don't show up, then the price doesn't change. The price is the same. So my suggestion, and it was only a suggestion because she was charging $30 an hour, was like, okay, we'll charge them both 25. While a lot of people think, oh, but it's not any extra work. Sometimes it is. And you don't know how much the extra work is going to be. So at least this covers that, right? If there's any pre-planning ahead of time or resources or tools that you have to get together, then you have that ability to get them together without being like feeling like you're being taken advantage of. So I feel like 25 an hour for both of them. So 25 for one kid, 25 for another kid, total $50 for the tutor. You're making more money than the $30, but they're getting a little bit of a break because there's two of them, would be a good fit in this particular situation. But if one person doesn't show on up, I feel like there needs to be like a policy that's written up ahead of time that they both are made aware of, that, hey, if you pay by month, if your child does not show up, there's not a makeup session. Like, you don't get to like make it
Yeah,
because it's not like tutoring where you get to do that, right? So
yeah.
they just have to understand that, I think, ahead of time, and then everything is good. Is that how you handle it, Michael? That they understand
Well,
ahead of time
I
how
have
that all
my own
works?
experience with that. I'm happy to
Yeah.
tell you the story of, because when I started working with groups, and I should say, to answer some of the conversation, my groups tend to come to me where the parents work out themselves the group. I kind of put it on if a parent is interested and they want to come to me, first I say, here's my one-to-one and here's my rate. I'm in a very affluent place, so my rate is higher. And then it's sort of groups is great. I might have some people who've expressed interest in group, but normally the parent will sort of, one of the things I offer is sort of, you get to work with your friends. So the kids kind of do that, which helps in a lot of these issues. But so then when they come to me as a group, and I've got usually two or three, I offer them a choice of policy up front. One is okay, if someone's absent, the other parents pay more. And the other option is there's a no absence policy. And if someone doesn't show, then that person is still on the hook for their share of the class, because it's not fair to the other parents who, had an expectation. And I do I have a very liberal cancellation policy. So if the parents can agree they want to cancel the meeting and they do that to me more than 24 hours in advance, great.
Sure.
Then nobody pays.
Sure.
And I offer the time splitting thing I mentioned, but honestly, very few parents have ever taken me up on that.
Mm,
Let's just reduce the length of the session.
sure.
Sometimes that happens. More often when it's just one or two, where it's a two
Mhm.
group going to a one, they'll be like, oh yeah, let's just do the shorter time, and my one student gets the whole thing. And there does seem to be a keen perception of a difference between one and two,
Mhm.
that, oh wow, I really do get more for my money when it's one-on-one.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
And therefore,
yeah,
it shouldn't be that they both pay full price for, some people had
right,
mentioned that they should both pay full price. And I disagree that they should both pay full price, because there is a different expectation when you get me all to
yeah,
yourself
yeah.
versus splitting me between two different kids, because there's no way that I can give you the exact same instruction one on one and one on two. It changes. It changes the dynamics significantly. And Erica, like you had mentioned, it is very hard, I find, in the reading world to get two kids that are reading at the same level.
Mhm.
Like, there's just, they have different issues, they have different intricacies. And maybe sometimes I think it's because I have complicated my life and learned way too much about this topic that
Well, that's
I
a,
can those intricacies. But here's how to make it simple. If you want to ever do group classes, have a group goal. So kids struggling with sight words, kids struggling with fluency. A fluency class could be a class where the kids are all working on fluency. They could be doing readers theaters with different, reading levels and all those different kinds of things, where they're all working on their fluency, but they're getting that help in that specific area versus you trying to close the gap of their reading. Like, they're at this level and you're trying to close the gap. You're taking one skill. Um, Kids that struggle with vocabulary acquisition, right? There's so many of them out there to be able to. I did a vocabulary group class one time where I had four kids inside of the class, and they were all reading their own different books, and their job was to find 5 words that they had to research in between. They had to read in between our sessions. We only met once a week. They had to read in between the sessions, and they had to pick 5 words they didn't know the meaning of inside of their own reading. Then they had to teach those words to us. I have to tell you, I don't like group classes.
Well, I was hoping you three might be able. So I was thinking in my mind, I hear that and I'm thinking, like, kind of like when your kids were younger, swim lessons.
Yeah.
Here's the group, and then here are each things that you have to do to progress to the next group. But what I found, for simplicity's sake, let's say that, and excuse me, Stan, because calculus is not my strength, but let's say that Michael finds, 5 parents, they all want their kids help with calculus. And then Stan starts tutoring them. But then what I find is when you get in there, even though the parents think the problem's calculus or it's this, when you get to that bottom base layer, these two kids might really, I don't know, can't solve equations or something like that.
Yeah,
And these
they don't multiplication facts real well or whatever
right.
the case may be,
Sorry,
right?
guys. I was trying to like up it. Like, from
I
the
just want to
tutor's
say, I would probably never do a group with calculus. I think the reason groups work for me is because it's younger kids and it's enrichment.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, for enrichment. That's the key.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
enrichment and it's also younger kids because I find with younger kids, they're actually a little intimidated working one-to-one with a tutor. And they like the being in the group. They're also, they tend to be the gifted kids, similar to Stan. So they're the kids who would be in the class trying to like raise their hand and get the answer. And it works really well with them in the group because they talk about things. They bounce their answers off of each other. They actually explain to each other when they're going through something together. Some of my best groups, not every group, but
So,
it's
so I'll bring it back down because I thought you both were
well,
doing
no,
those.
it
Let's
wasn't to say to
when-
bring it back down. It was to say some work better than others. And
Okay.
like a
Well,
group,
so that's what I do, but I'm not finding, like, let's take 5th grade math. So the parents get together, they find these 4 other neighbors, they're all going to come, a group of 5. And from the parents' perspective, their issue is multiplication and division. And so I get in there and we're doing a small group of 5, but the reason for why, I mean, yes, they might have issues with multiplication, but I'm finding the reason why is different for each one of those kids. And so then I'm not closing the gap. So does that make sense? Like, how do you handle that when the reason why they're struggling with the topic is specific to each kid? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because like math is cyclical and it builds on top of each other. So if you're missing certain skills, it becomes more difficult as you go on, and then as you're required to use those skills, it just becomes more complicated. But sometimes I think we overcomplicate it because we know so much, right? We have to think about what is the overall goal that we would like the group to help accomplish. Is it to be able to increase your fluency skills? Where are your fluency skills at right now? Is it that you're just kind of reading monotone? So think about the problems that kids have that you can help solve. So if my kids are always reading monotone, that would be a group that I would specifically like reach on out to. Like, does your kid read in a very monotone way, but you'd really like to be able to get them to read with more expression and understand what they're reading better? And if they're like, yes, then this would be the perfect group for you, right? Like have that goal set out ahead. Like, does your kid struggle with comprehension? It seems like no matter what they read, they're between the grades of 3 and 5, let's say, and it doesn't matter what they read, they can read any of the words perfectly, right? So they're not really struggling with phonics. Parents at least have that kind of a clue or that kind of an idea, right? On, all right, is it comprehension or is it phonics? Usually they can answer that question with pretty good accuracy. Then I can say, okay, if they know they've got a kid that struggles with comprehension, then working on thinking while you're reading and comprehension skills based stuff would be helpful for a kid like this. And so for a group, we could have, we're going to focus on these skills or these strategies so that they can apply them to the books that they're reading. They don't necessarily, it's not about closing the entire gap. It's about taking one problem or area and saying, how can we make this work? A group class doesn't have to be a class that goes on forever and ever and ever. Like sometimes tutoring feels like it goes on forever because the kids just stay with you, right? But a group class can actually have a time period to it. And you can say, okay, it's going to go from this time period to this time period. Let's say it's summer enrichment, right? It can go from, July to the end of August, and it's going to be 8 weeks that we're going to work together, and here's the skill that we're going to specifically work on, or here's what we're going to be doing during that time. Which again kind of goes back to your original thing, Erica, where you said like tutoring and group classes, they don't mean the same thing. right? Like tutoring, when I think about tutoring, I think about, okay, where are the gaps? How can I fill them in? How can I do all of these kinds of things? And we use that word coaching before too. Like, well, maybe coaching is a better word for it. You guys always have to remember that the conversations that you have with parents and the conversations that you have while you're in the marketing stage might look just a little bit different, right? So, unfortunately, nobody's looking for math coaching for third grade, right? While that's what we might feel like we're
Well,
doing more.
yeah, I mean, there are, I I would say there are people who there are people out there who are looking for third grade, right? Usually
But they're not
they've had
typing it
good
into Google.
experience.
They're not typing it into Google so they can
Oh,
find you.
yes. Oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
from a
yeah, yeah.
marketing perspective, I'm not saying that
Yes, yes,
they're
yes.
not looking
Yeah,
for it. I'm saying they're not looking
yeah.
for it
Hmm.
online, which is where a lot of them
Yes,
find us because we're
of
online
course.
tutors. So if I put in math coaching for third grade, I'm probably not going to get that people are actually typing that in. I could use a tool like Uber Suggest to find that out. Are people actually typing that word in? If I get a big fat zero, that means nobody is typing that in. Now that's different than results. I know lots of people always get confused when I start talking about this, but it's not results that come on up. Like you see millions of results that come on up when you type in a word. That is not how many people are searching for it. That's how much content exists. So if I start using marketing that is different, the language is different than what the parents know. I have to know what are the words the parents are using. What are the parents using to search? How are the parents talking about it? Now, on my website, I can describe it, I can analyze it, I can get a little bit more deeper into what does it mean, what does it look like, so when they get there, they know, is this going to be a right fit for me or not a right fit for me? When I have conversations with parents and I let them know, like, hey, I'm going to be doing this group class where we're going to be focusing on this particular skill, and here is how it's going to work. If I have if if I have two students, here's how much it's going to cost per parent. If I have three students, here's how much it's going to cost per parent. If I have four students, we could even break it up into 1 to 5 students, it costs this much, 6 to 10 students, this much, whatever it is that you want to do. You can obviously price it any way that you want to. When it comes to having those group classes, but you always want to, obviously, like the whole point of doing a group class is so you can make more money. So
Yeah. So, Joanne, I have a question for you, and I guess for everyone here, but something that Eric has said about, you mentioned that there might be different reasons why someone's not performing at grade level or at different levels, right? At least in
Mhm.
the reading world. So if you, and again, I'm taking this idea from an organic chemistry, uh, I can't really say a tutor, I guess an instructor, right? Because they most frequently run seminars, right? Where they're like and I get texts in 1 hour, they're launching in 30 minutes, right? And then she sends them out to all the subscribers. Um, what about grouping people not by their level, but by their gaps, right?
Mhm.
Meaning, and I don't, right, like I'm running 3 weeks on, I don't know, spelling. I'm running a 4 week group class on students who have a difficulty with blank skill, right? It seems that what you're telling me is that would be a better way of grouping them
It
because
could be.
you're
Spelling gets a
working
little
on this.
difficult just to say, like, spelling. I would need to still know their level of spelling to be able to help that group.
Okay, so I said, you said there might be reasons like sight words, you said, and something
Like
else.
sight words, sure, sight words. Let's say they don't know basic sight words, then yeah, sight words could be like a great
Yeah,
group to have them go through, or
yes,
fluency, or comprehension, or yeah, any of those
exactly.
different areas. Yeah, can
Or
be.
or sort of, to get back to my sort of to my area, like someone might be at whatever grade level having issues with multiplication. So a group just not just fourth grade math, right? Not just problem word problems, right? Because a word problem might involve multiplication. So, but breaking it down into the more specific tasks, right? I
Mm,
have an issue this is for students who are struggling with negative number operations,
Yes.
right? Rather
Yes.
than, right? So that's
Yes.
like, it seems that would group kids better, right?
Yeah.
Because you want, right? Everyone likes to see others struggling. Everyone likes to see others mess up the same way you mess up, right?
Yeah.
It feels
And they make
good.
similar mistakes. They make similar mistakes.
Yeah.
So you can really make a lot of impact in a small amount of time. And I don't know about you guys, but that's why I'm
Yeah.
in this job, because I want to make a big impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Like nobody likes like an environment where everyone gets something and you don't. It's so much nicer to be in an environment where everyone else is as equally lost as you, right? Like we like that for, I leave it to professionals to explain why that is. I just know that's how human, right? It feels nicer. So grouping kids by dysfunction, I shouldn't say dysfunction, grouping kids by areas of improvement.
Yeah.
Or just
Right,
skill-based, just
Or
skill-based.
a specific
Yeah.
skill or a specific
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like kids that are struggling with multiplication, like they can't memorize their facts. That's a really easy thing to do as a group class, right? That
That's
makes it
part
really, really easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes it, I think that's where leveling comes in, because, and again, if we recall how we learned, let's say, multiplication, there was often one or two kids, maybe even us, who knew the facts, right? Let's say there's a multiplication test, they finish it in 3 minutes and then goof off, right?
I
And
hate
then there
you.
was
If that was you, I hate you. No, that was never me.
right,
No,
right.
I'm just kidding, Sam.
But
I don't really hate you.
right, and of course, no, but no, it's annoying because it was always so obvious, right? And sometimes the teacher would say, keep the paper on your desk, right? Don't disrupt the classroom, and even if you're done, to try to deal with that, right? Because it sort of highlights, it highlights the vast disparity that sometimes exists in these skills, right?
Yeah.
That someone will need 50 minutes to finish a multiplication quiz that someone will finish in 2.
Yeah.
Right, like it's literally like, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think grouping people by that might work. And actually, I mean, I'm sort of taking notes. You're giving me great ideas
Isn't
to
it cool
try.
how we all get like great ideas when we do this? Now, I saw
Yeah.
something cool kind of pop on up, and I'm glad that it came on up. I believe it was Michael and Erica who said, "Wait a minute, I'm not making more money with my group classes. Maybe I'm doing something wrong." And I would say, okay, I usually don't see these things I don't usually say these things, but yes, you're definitely doing things wrong. If you're not making more money with your group classes, you're definitely doing something wrong, because that's the whole point of a group class, is so that you can make more money. In fact, if you go to Schoolify, they have they have it like, how much do I need to charge? Do you know how much more you could be making if you figure out group classes and you like them? I don't like them,
Yeah, I
so
don't
I'm not
like
gonna
them.
I
What
don't
happens
like
in
them, so I'm not gonna grow my business that way.
Well,
I'm gonna continue to help other tutors, and then I'm gonna work with my students one-on-one, because that's what I love and that's what I prefer. But if you enjoy doing the group classes, then you should be charging you shouldn't be charging the same amount.
well,
You should
um,
be charging more for each of those sessions,
people in my
because
area don't go with that. They want the deal.
I disagree
they are
too.
getting a deal, though. They are getting a deal. They're like, if you've
My
got 2
area does not.
students,
No, and that's why on the post I said, I don't even entertain a parent if they bring it to me. Like in that situation, it was very specific where it was one person being serviced. It wasn't in Michael's case where like, hey, I've got these 4 or 5 other people. Let me bring them on in. Like when it's one-on-one like that and they ask, can I bring my
oh
friend, or
yeah,
we're
it's so
coming.
different, isn't it?
They want that, but I'm in Michael's position. Like, I don't have enough time to like do what I'm doing now and then to switch to groups and give them a discount. Like, I get it. Who doesn't want the group discount, But I don't know why I would start doing that when I even get to bill for my planning hours. So I'm making a lot of money. Why would I start making less money? I guess.
Right. No, you should definitely. That's why, like, that's why if you are going to do group classes, you advertise that you have group classes and what are those rates and what are those prices cost. So it would be, I'm more than happy to take a look at being able, I do agree with you. Like, I feel like when the parent brings it up, I think it's different when you advertise it as a tutor and here's what you're looking to fill that group with versus a parent coming on in and saying, "Hey, could you just add my child to the session so that it's the same price, but both these kids are getting the same attention." I would say in that case, it's a very different situation. Even siblings sometimes. I had a set of twins where the parent was like, "I'd like you to work with both of them at the same time." I said, "First, I need to do an assessment to see if they're at the same level." She's like,
Mhm.
"They are." And I'm like, "Well, the assessment will be able to show that." And I was able to show how they weren't at the same level and how that wouldn't be the best use of my time to be able to work with them. I said, if you want to split it between like 30 minutes with one kid and 30 minutes with the other, I can do that. But to work with them at the same time is not going to work because they are at a different level. So I think parents don't always have a good idea of that. But if you've got like a class where you're like, hey, we're going to work on this skill. Is your child struggling with, with being able to uh, read like it's like they're speaking, that they read with that monotone voice, like you've got like that skill, you've got that goal and you fill that class. I think people are more than happy to say, oh, with the more kids that join this class, the cheaper it will be for me, and so maybe I could go and get some other people to help fill the class. There is Osborne, and maybe Beth remembers her name. I think I don't think it's Sarah Osborne, but Osborne. I know that she teaches a language. I think it's either French or Italian. And she does her group classes based on this. So her group classes are based on her kids are all entering at the same level, right? It's like beginning level 1 of whatever language it is. And then she fills her class based off of that Summer Osborne. Thank you. I knew Beth would know it. She's my brain, my other part of my brain. So Summer Osborne, she teaches these language classes, and then she's able to fill the classes and be like, hey, if you're able to get more people on in, it's going to be cheaper. For 1 to 5 kids, it's this much. For 6 to 10 kids, it's this much. For 11 to 15 kids, it's this much. But they're all going through the exact same level content material, so it's a little bit easier at that point in time for her to be able to do something like that. But it's definitely possible, again, skill based, to be able to do it. The parent kind of coming in, which is what Joy was asking, right? She said that she was tutoring one student at $30 and they're asking for a friend to join. How much should they both pay? And so it could be that she mentions, hey, it's $25 per kid, we'll bring down the rate a little bit, but they're still going to be getting a lot of me in this process. Instead of saying, oh, well, I'll charge you $15 per kid and you're not making more money. No, that would not work for me. I would say $25 because there is now what I whether we agree or we don't agree on how much Joy is charging isn't part of the conversation, right? Because everybody's at a different level. Everybody is charging what they feel like is their fair rate. So whether we agree with what she's charging or what she's not charging, that's not up for debate because the question is, how much should I charge? So if I were to bring that up, if I don't want to do it, then I would say, I'm sorry, that's not something I do. If I do want to do it, then I'd say it would be 25 each per child, but it would not be a straight break of 15 for one kid and 15 for another. Yeah, Michael.
So my
Yeah,
oh,
I just feel like I want to respond. I think it depends a lot on the particulars. And this is a question I had for you all because I don't do any online marketing. I know, Joanne, you do. I don't know about the others, but my business is pretty much completely word of mouth.
That's awesome.
And I've tried to think about expanding because I'm online. I could tutor kids all over the world, but it turns out I happen to live in a community that's very tight knit, and that has been, probably better than any marketing I could do as far as, and so for now it's working.
Yeah.
And I charge a high rate, and so my rate is high enough that I actually get more money by having parents come to me and split the rate than if I didn't have those hours, because they'd say, there's no way I'm going to pay $90 for a third grader, to get tutoring.
Oh,
So
no,
it
they
just depends.
do. They do.
Well,
They
but it just
do.
depends on your rate. It depends on your
I
rate,
charge 100 an hour, and I work with kids in kindergarten sometimes,
and they'll pay that.
and
And
they pay it. Well, obviously, I wouldn't be in business
I'm
if
at
they didn't.
75.
yeah.
Well, the
Um,
other thing I like, Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So when she was talking about, either one, do you want to do it? Okay, no. I mean, In the right situation, I would, if I knew both kids and they were legitimately on the same level and the parents were easy to work with, sure, I would love to accommodate people. But when I first started this new wave last year, I had crazy things happening, like one parent raking me over the coals because the child left 5 minutes early when I'm like, no, it very clearly says sessions are 45 to 50 minutes. And it was, literally, there's a timestamp on it. You can't argue with that. Over 5 minutes. I had another kid who the mom actually wanted to bring the kid in person so that I could personally meet him. Like, I didn't honestly want to have to say, parent, you make your kid more expensive, not the kid itself. I was trying really hard to be discreet, but
Yeah.
then she got me and I got stuck. And she's like, well, could I bring him in and could I see if he's really that more expensive rate? So I do that. And she just kept pushing. And then finally I had to fire her as a client because she's arguing over 5 minutes and it's a $10 swing. And she's rolling up in a Tesla, going to the Dominican Republic for spring break, Colorado for winter break. And I'm like, no. So if you had solutions for that, I'm like, why would I get into all these nitty gritties if
No.
I'm perfectly fine? I don't need you. Go away.
Yeah.
No. I had a
I've
client
been
too
lucky.
that's done that to me as well, where I had they kept asking for stuff and I was accommodating. They wanted specific homework, so I was giving them homework, and then they wanted me to work with both kids, so I was working with both kids, not at the same time, separate times, but like back to back. And then they wanted me to tape the sessions. So I was like, sure, I could tape the sessions because she said I want to work with my kids in between sessions. I'm like, great. No, she wanted to use the tape recordings to analyze my teaching style and everything else. And I was having a slow computer day, so she was just like, it took you a long time to get from here to here. Her kid showed up 10 minutes late, so I gave one kid 20 minutes, another kid 30 minutes. And she's like, I feel like you should have split it in half equally and blah, blah, blah. I said, you know what? I feel like you had a legitimate reason to ask for recordings. And I was more than happy because you wanted to help your child in between sessions to be able to do that. I feel like you're using the recordings in a different way that was not agreed upon. And you've now crossed a line. And I don't think this is going to be a healthy working relationship. And so I said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to continue to work with you. I will refund the money from the sessions that we have not done yet. And I wish you the best in finding a new tutor. And she messaged me back and she said, I think that you should refund me for the sessions we've had. And I said, I put in the time and I worked those hours. So I disagree that I need to pay you the money for the sessions that we had, but I will refund you the money for the sessions we did not have. And I wish you luck on finding the next tutor for your child. The end. Because I'm like, no, it is not worth that hassle to have
But I
clients like
did.
that.
So, okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted, for like those first 6 months, I felt like I was being gaslit. I'm like, am I going crazy? Like, what is wrong with you? Now, that one mom, she did call me back 3 weeks later, bawling, begging me. And I'll even pay you your higher rate. Well, gee, thank you. You're both pharmacists. You have plenty of money. And I said, I'm really sorry. But I said, like Michael, I was honest and said, I don't have a website. I don't do any marketing. Everything is referral based because we're a small, tight knit community. And I said, you don't go into your cardiologist and try to negotiate the rate for your child. I want that same respect in return. And you should have considered that your son is 15-year-old with severe autism. The few people out there who will actually service him and can do it well. You should have considered that when you were treating poorly. And I just let her go, even though it would have been, she was willing to pay me $75 an hour. She wanted 5 days a week. And
Nope,
I
for her it
just,
would be 100. I heard
well,
one person said, when you have those clients that you're like, I'm not sure I want to take them on, add $25 to your rate.
well, that's what it was. I had initially told her 50 because she was deceitful and told me it was more like homework support. I'm like, he's severely autistic. No. And so I I said no, 75 after meeting him, but I didn't want to have to say,
Yeah.
your child's fine. I would have tutored him for $50, but you make him 75. So I just left it vague as it's a varying rate based on needs, blah, blah, blah. And then when she called me back 3 weeks later, she said, "And I'll even pay you the 75." I said, no, thank you.
That's what you just said.
Consider,
I am so sorry. I am booked now.
yeah.
I wouldn't even like give her like I wouldn't even give her all the
Yeah,
backstory. I would just like
yeah,
ignore all of that, and I would just be like, "I'm so sorry. I'm booked solid at this point.
yeah.
That's it."
Yeah,
Well,
How
I,
about us, Stan, since you and Michael work in small communities too, I've always been hesitant to do that because this community is very small. And so the next day, Molly calls me and I do have an opening. They talk, and then that looks like I'm deceitful. So
Do you
how,
have it where people are calling you every single day?
oh my gosh, yes. Well,
Okay, that's
wait,
great.
no, not every day. I'd say 5 new people a week.
yeah.
Wow.
So I, so
And can you
I
take them all on?
No.
So then you're already telling people that you can't take them, right? Because you're already booked solid.
Well, I was talking more like this was last summer when I first like
So
really
what do you mean by deceitful?
like so I think this was what Michael was saying. My community is very small and it's all word of mouth. So if I would have not been fully transparent with that mother and said, no, I'm not taking you because you treated me poorly and I deserve better. I don't know exactly what I said,
well,
but it was something.
Yeah.
you,
And I
I,
say, no, I'm booked solid. And then 2 days later, I get 3 more phone calls, and those people are delightful. And I would love to
Well,
see.
I don't think you have to be transparent, right? I don't think you have to be transparent. Like, so some things I learned from the business world, like that I'm taking into this, or not to business, management consulting, which is like tutoring for big corporations, right? Like Georgia Pacific, right? Is number one, you do not need to be transparent. You can be transparent, but I know it feels good to not tell off, to be like, the reason I don't want to work with you is because every time you never have money ready when I come, and then you dig through a kitchen drawer for 10 minutes looking for a blank, like this has obviously happened, digging for a blank check. And then I'm 10, right? This was in person. And then I'm 10 minutes late to my next student. And by the time I get to my last student, you blew up my schedule, right? But if it's enough to not work with them, right? So if to take something from the big corporations like Varsity, etc., they just sent this very, right, like I can't meet your needs, right? And that makes people, right? I think it's a lot of these problem people, like the woman who called you back begging, right? First of all, I would not take her. It sets a bad precedent, in my opinion, right? Like even in the court, right? If someone comes back offering more money, like you create this quid pro quo situation, right? Where they're like, okay, so I can get away with not doing X behavior as long as I pay for it. And
Mm.
I don't like to be in that situation. So like it has to be done almost a really, really meaningful amount. Like if your base was 75, if they would say, I will pay you, right? And like a lot of the big tutors charge when like GMAT tutoring is often $250 an hour, right? If they were to say, I'm gonna come and I will pay you $250 an hour, right? And they're contrite, sure, right? It has to be a meaning, right? It has to be not a painful amount for them, but an amount, it's not just, oh, all right. It has to be something where they acknowledge that something has been done that wasn't right. And it's not just word like, I will pay you, let's say you're 75, I'll pay you 100, right? Or whatever it is that is enough to sort of, because I did not think it's a good precedent to set with people. You're telling them you can maltreat me as long as you pay enough. And that's not something I'm personally comfortable with, right? Um, I guess it's sort of something that's my first thing. The second, yeah, I guess that's sort of what I wanted
I
to.
agree with Stan, and I kind of have my own thoughts on that. And one is I've been very fortunate. I've had I don't think I've ever had a parent who's treated me this badly, in these stories you've described, but, knock on wood, I'm sure it's just a matter of time. And two, I think I would probably do kind of a two-pronged approach where I would say, I wouldn't say I'm fully booked, but I'd say I have a waiting list. I'm booked up. I can put you on the waiting list. But before I put you on the waiting list, we have an issue because of what happened that we need to settle. And, how do you propose we settle that? And they'll offer more money. And you could say, well, offering more money is fine, but that's not enough. We also have to, we need to make sure it's very clear, these are my policies and you accept them. And
Yeah.
and then, I'll put you on the waiting list, and then it gives you time to think and cool off. And, you can come back a week later and say, okay, I have a slot now.
Yeah. So what I wanted to sort of ask also everyone in the room, because this sort of goes back to the idea of group charging, group pricing. So going back to, let's say, 2012, when I started, 2013, let's say a family would go on vacation and I would continue working with their child, right? And also usually a good sign if a family wants to work over the summer because they understand the importance of what you're doing, right? My worst performing students disappear for the summer and are even more in the hole come September than the ones who were already doing well and just were doing a once a week, let's keep fresh things. But at that time, the Skype was the main thing, right? And they were like, can we work on Skype? And the rate question, the way I viewed it was, you're still buying an hour of my time and I'm selling my time. So I'm not giving a discount. And I also think that I don't think you're getting less of a product, right? Just because we're using Skype. Again, this is 2012, 2013. The online stuff was a bit newer at that time. So my question is, if that's the logic I'm using, then technically in the group, it's still 1 hour of my time, right? If my product is my time.
That's not how the other tutoring businesses though work. If you go to Sylvan, they're charging the parents $50 an hour. If they have 3 children, they are charging $150 an hour, and they're paying the tutor 15 or 20. So
Yeah.
And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. Like, I obviously think it's wrong for the tutor, but it is a business, and accommodating more students does mean that you are taking on more responsibility as well for what it is that you're teaching them. We do have to head on out.
Okay.
This has been a really awesome conversation, you guys. It's been great to talk about like group prices and all of that kind of stuff, and I hope that you guys have been able to have new perspectives as you guys go on through your day and think about how you move forward with your business. And yes, I do agree with you. Yes, your product is more than just your time. It is the result that you're getting for these kids, and how much is that worth, I think, sometimes to the parents. And so at the end of the day, if I do ACT prep and I'm able to get I can get you, 10 points higher in your ACT score, it's more than just my time. It's something bigger. It's something bigger what you can accomplish. So thank you guys for joining us today, and come join us next week on Monday. We're going to be featuring Beth Hansford as our tutor of the week, and you'll be able to hear a little bit more about her story. So thanks for joining us today, you guys, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Joanne.